Hi, everyone, and welcome to Tech Talk Friday. We have a fabulous show today at Tech Talk Friday. So look forward to having a great conversation with all of you. And today we're going to have actually a very, very, very special guest here on Tech Talk Friday. And the guest is going to be none other than the co-founder of FAVE, Yeoh Chen Chow. So I'm going to bring Chen Chow on to the screen. And hey, Chen Chow, welcome to Tech Talk Friday. Really, really glad to have you with us.
Hi, Roshan. Yeah, great to be with you today in the Tech Talk Friday.
And Chen Chow, as maybe as an introduction, you're kind of a very big tech personality, right? You've got KFit and Groupon, and I mean you've been in the technology space, Jobstreet, and many others, even Accenture, I guess, on the consulting side. But maybe you can introduce yourself and tell us about yourself a little bit, because even though you're well known, not many people actually have heard of your story. So maybe in about 2-3 minutes, tell us a little bit about your story and tell us a little bit about your life. Especially how you got into the tech space.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Roshan. Yeah, so I think like for myself, I came from a small town in Malaysia, Nimon Tebal. So I think getting into tech space was pretty coincidental, to be honest, right? So I started my career in Accenture. So after 3 years in Accenture, I got into Jobstreet. So I think that time when I joined Jobstreet, that time Jobstreet was already close to 10 years. So I didn't get to see the very early days time. Jobstreet was around 500 people, but I did get a little bit of feel of startup-ish. Then in 2011, after Joe and Kylie sold off Group Small to Groupon, I joined Joe in this Groupon journey. So I think that was where the 2011 to 2015 started in Malaysia, eventually went on regional. I think there's got a chance to see the fast-paced startup-ish kind of life. And I think in 2015, YOLO came. You only live once. Decided to quit everything and
Yeah.
jump on. I think pretty scary. I think that put all the life savings into it, get zero salary, and went on. So that was where we started KFit. Yeah. So I know KFit and me doesn't really jive that much. So I think they call me KFat. But it's a so I think it's a journey where because where we after we left Groupon we couldn't compete against Groupon, so there's a non-compete. So we eventually went on the fitness side to build for 1 year. I think it's just like Amazon started with books, right? And then a lot of times you start with some premium customers. So we started fitness, built it for 1 year. In 2016, we acquired a subsidiary of Groupon in Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, and then we built on Faith in 2017. And I think since then there have been 3 years in this journey through various ups and downs and excitement.
So Faith. One of the very interesting things about Faith is that Faith managed to acquire some form of funding or investment from a company in India, right? And you got it in this last couple of weeks or months, I guess, right? During this whole period where India is in turmoil with lockdown, Malaysia, and pretty much the whole world is in turmoil, and yet Faith managed to get some sort of investment and funding. Talk us through that, because I think that's very interesting to a lot of our entrepreneurs and technopreneurs. How do you get funded in this very volatile and very tedious and tough environment? What did you guys do right? What's your secret?
Yeah, yeah. I don't know whether it's secret, but I think that a lot of it is I think the lucky as well. I think right place, right time, and I think a lot of it. I think today, just like I think this session is all on virtual, right? So I think that with as COVID came about, I think everyone adapt. Everyone goes through life. So I think whatever that we were doing in offline world, we're doing on online world. I think fundraising is the same thing, right? So I think that from the investor standpoint, they will try to do due diligence on the company, eventually negotiation and everything, right? So I think that the process maybe slightly different. So I think like during the so far, like I said, the Pine Lab, the key leadership of Pine Lab, we actually haven't met them.
Oh,
So because due to the lockdown, so the whole process was done virtual. I think that I think the multiple calls, I would say that multiple, whether WhatsApp call, WebEx call, Zoom call, emails, and all those kind of things. So we did multiple of that. I think so I think the only difference compared to the typical fundraising process is that it is not a face to face. So which
okay.
means that we need to rely on video and everything.
But you
Yes.
said you managed to get the funding without actually meeting the leadership team of Pi, right? Um,
Yeah.
and is that because there was a big trust in you guys? I mean, how did it work out in the end? Where with minimal, sort of minimal due diligence, how did this whole thing pan out? I mean,
Yeah.
What tipped you? What do you think tipped it for you?
Yeah, so I think the due diligence process, I think, is more or less similar. Maybe it could be faster by a bit, but I think the only difference is that instead of face to face, is through a lot of this video call. And I think
Okay. So you
actually
still had
when
the
you go on,
talks.
yeah, multiple of that, right? So, and I think video, in a way, you don't need to wait for logistics. So let's say a lot of time when we cross country, you have to arrange a flight. So you say, okay, let's meet 3 days later, 4 days later, and then next week you fly again to meet or whatnot,
Yep.
right? So right now is whatever time that both parties are suitable, you go jump on the call, right? So,
Yes. Yes.
and video is real time, and I think good is lockdown. No one has any travel. So everyone actually had more time to do a lot of these kind of things, right? Because in a normal time, oh, this person is travel, this person is not free, that. But so I think that this whole process actually went through quite well, and I think building trust, a lot of it could be done through video as well, right? I
Mm-hmm.
think in the end is you're almost seeing, with today's technology, you're almost seeing the other person, right? So let's say right now
Yeah.
I'm seeing Roshan's face. It, like, of course I know Roshan for many years, but I think that it is that, right? So I think a lot of it is that, whether the excitement, whether the dub and everything, I think it can still happen. I think, of course, the explanation and things may be slightly different because now you're explaining via video. There's a lot more Excel file, a lot more, and I think one thing is also a lot more documentation. You write it down, which
Mm-hmm.
is also good because then people knowing each other. And maybe just the intro of Pine Labs, right? Maybe many people here may not have heard of them. I think in India they're very famous. I think in Southeast Asia maybe not yet, but I think in India basically Pine Labs, they does credit card terminals predominantly, and then they, of course, they have gift cards and a bunch of other stuff. So in India they transact close to 30 billion US dollar a year.
Wow. Wow.
So they have a half a million terminal in India, and basically they have a bunch of great shareholders. So Sequoia Capital, Temasek
Yep.
Holdings, Mastercard, PayPal. So we're very honored to have the chance to work with them. And I think that since we're during the courting period till the last few weeks since they come on board, I think been exciting. I think speaking to them, a lot of very very smart people, much of some of them whether IIT or all the other
Yep.
places,
Yeah.
very analytical, intellectual, working very hard. And I think it's a great learning journey for us as
Yep.
well. I
Yep.
think
Yep.
learning working across.
And I mean I look at it and say India is a great market, right? I mean ultimately if you talk about China, India, Indonesia, I mean we are smack in three big markets that potentially will have big strategic implications for FAVE also as you guys think about your brand and going somewhat regional. So just talk very quickly about FAVE. I mean what is FAVE thinking now that you've got this strategic investment? What's on the cards for FAVE? What's next, and what are you guys thinking in terms of conquering the world and or making the world a better place? I mean,
Yeah.
what's really the game plan here?
Yeah, I don't know whether I will dare to say the conquering the world, but I think the in our core market, Malaysia, Singapore, and Indonesia, I think especially Malaysia, Singapore, where we are stronger, and Indonesia, we are still building up. I think a lot of it is how do we really accelerate a lot of digitalization, right, of the SME. I think COVID is a good wake up call for everyone.
Mm,
I think to bring the process digital, and I think process of digital, a lot of it, think of it is that how to make it easier, cheaper, better, faster, whether for merchant, whether for consumer. And I think a lot of it is connecting that dots, right? And I think a lot of things that we do, or the solutions we do, is trying to narrow, think of what the big giants, the big chain, right? Whether McDonald's, Starbucks, H&M, whatever those big ones can do. How do we enable every smaller ones to be able to do it? Whether a cafe, whether a restaurant, whether a retail outlet, etc. So I think that's sort of where we look at. So I think in terms of solution wise, so maybe I take an example now. Let's say the next 1-2 minutes, think of yourself as a cafe, right? I think imagine that you are a cafe owner. Right? Say today you want to accept multiple payments, right? So in a traditional way, you will need to integrate across. Let's say today you want to accept credit card, debit card, you need to integrate. You want to accept various online banking, whether e-wallets, whether you accept even AirAsia points. So I think basically what we provide is basically you don't need to integrate. You come on board, download
mm,
FaveBees app, just sign on, and then you get it straight, right? So that's, I think, one piece, right? So then I think the second piece of it, uh, looking at, let's say, new customers, right? How do we bringing in new customers? So I think that's a deals part. So I think a big company, maybe they have a big marketing war chest to be able to do it. The smaller one may not be able to. And then I think that FavePay cashback, how do we enable that to do as well? So I think, like, let's say get FavePay cashback, if you think on it, is that in the traditional, the big companies maybe be able to have their apps or maybe they have a strong loyalty cards to build customers to come back to the same place. But whereas a small cafe may not be able to do it. So I think what we enable is enable anyone to be able to issue the cash back for customers to go back. And when the customer go back, you just pay. You don't even need to remember it, whether the merchant or consumer, and you auto deduct through. And then the
Okay.
gift card solution is the same thing, right? Like Starbucks has a loyalty gift cards where you can top up amounts, everything. How do you enable across? So I think it just continue building that continuum of that. And I think a lot of these solutions is thinking of it is how do you make it easier, cheaper, better, faster, whether for merchant or consumer. So I think that's sort of the direction we continue to build on it. I think each process, each thing we add on as we go along. I think that over the next few weeks, few months, we'll continue adding out new things. And I think each of that hopefully is make it even easier, faster to
Okay.
create, right? So I think that's
I
going to be
mean,
convenience.
I mean, essentially, from what I hear, is same strategy, but intensity of execution is going to be heightened significantly with this investment. So there's not going to be any pivot or anything. It's just essentially same, but a lot more intensity and a lot more focus and a lot more drive and determination to get things done in execution, I guess, right?
Yeah, I think in a way that, and I think also one of the things that we also provide will be that I think within Pine Labs, because they are doing terminal, right? And I think for us, we are on a mobile app aspects,
Yes.
right? So I think one of the things is within Southeast Asia as well. So I think that the Pine terminal and would in a way preloaded with Faith Biz, which is
Be
our, and then I think for
offering
yeah, and I think also for the Faith merchants, we are also offering them the terminal solution from Pine if
Okay,
they
got
want.
it.
So basically a lot of cross sell kind of play to make it streamlined. So I think that would be where we're looking at.
Okay. So that'll be an interesting new dynamics for Faith and Pi, I guess, to some extent. I'm going to just very quickly, there's a bunch of comments that came in, but obviously thanks, Cheryl, great to have you here, and for Arwin, yes, I will do that one of these days. I have about 3,000 books actually in my house. One of these days, I plan to actually read all of them. I'm slowly getting through most of them, but one of these days we'll do a Roshan reads. But I think I want to jump into my first question for you, Chen Chow, and I think it's based on what was talked about just now, and this is from Jaden Liu. So Jaden talks about building trust through virtual environment. You talked about getting your investment by building trust with these investors and these partners potentially. Maybe, I mean, I guess he's asking for a little bit more detail. How are there some steps or are there some tips or best practices that you can share on how to build trust in a virtual environment? So this question from Jaden. Chen Chow, you want to address this?
Yeah, good. Yeah, thanks, Roshan. Thanks, Jaden, for the question. Yeah, so I think building trust, I think a lot of it, I think and a lot of times think back on ourselves, right? How would someone else gain your trust, right? So because to earn someone else's trust, I think all of us are also recipient of trust, right? And giving of trust. So I think a lot of times is that and I think a lot of sincerity. And I think whether face to face, whether through virtual and everything, I think sincerity need to come across. And of course, I think through virtual or maybe even to emails, to WhatsApp, sometimes messages could get confusion. So I think a lot of it through virtual that we do is how to make it clearer so that people don't misunderstood, especially people that you haven't met before, people that you haven't worked long before. So I think that process is there, right? So I think, let's say example, you want to run through a spreadsheet via virtual. Then maybe you want to go in and say, okay, step one, go to this tab, this self for C8, right? So basically be very clear in each part, right? And I think, and a lot of time, I think giving each other benefit of doubt, because sometimes when you through message, let's say WhatsApp message, you may think that could be the other person could be angry, but actually the person is not. It's just that the person maybe a very short reply because the person was busy, because we won't be able to see the other side, right? So I think a lot of the trust, and I think a lot of time is to build the trust is we need to provide the trust, and I think we'll earn along the way through, right? And I think a lot is open communication. I think alignment, pulling the right people across, and I think a lot of times also is that while we do sometimes bigger sessions, a very useful one is also do one-on-one, because a lot of times it's through one-on-one, especially with newer people, you get to build and not just understanding on the company, but I think a lot of times it's also understanding each other. So I think a lot of times as we talk to them, well, they check on us, we're also checking on them. And I think speaking about what's their vision, personal vision, not just company vision, and likelihood they will ask you back, right? And what's your personal vision? So I think a lot of that, and I think engagement with different people in the team, different across, and I think aligning timeline, aligning process and checking in. So I think a lot of it, the style of working need to be aligned, I think through virtual. So I think that that can be done. I think it's just that both sides need to think on it and going positively with that.
Okay, I just Cheryl adds up that is a thanks for that question. But I think she wants a little bit more input. When it comes to dealing with money, it's not so easy building trust, especially when it comes to deals and making money. Is there a difference, or it's the same sort of thing? I mean, when it comes to money deals and I mean, in this case, would that make a difference, or it's the same process?
Yeah, I think in a way somewhat similar, right? Because I think if you think on it, right, is let's say Pilot has been around for 20 over years. So I think they have been established much more. And I think today with technology, whether LinkedIn, whether through all the kind of things you can basically connect, right? And I think the other part is also that they I think like let's say for on their part to us, right? So I think a lot of it is also I think is have a lot of good chat, a lot of good in the process and everything, right? And going through with it, I think that will hopefully simulate through. And I think the other one is I think we were lucky in this case as well. Sequoia Capital is also invested in Pilabs and FAVE. So I think we have a one common shareholder as well. And I think within that, I think that hopefully will also connect that dot a bit better
Mhm.
across.
Yeah.
But I think the whether with money or not, I think a lot of it is that I think the thing because I think especially at the Series B, Series C stage, I think a lot of it is a lot more data. Do they
Mm.
believe in this data? And I think with COVID coming, I think a lot of it is, and we were affected as well by COVID. So a lot of it is how well we can recover, and then what's the future from there, right? And also that adds in uncertainty, because with COVID, I think especially early part of COVID, I think there was very uncertain. So I think most people were doing wait and see. So I
Yeah.
think this thing go heighten up in maybe June, July, where we see that Malaysia reopen in early May and how it has gradually picked up. So I think it adds some uh, data points for us. And then I think
Yeah.
as Singapore open up,
Okay.
Indonesia open up, I think people can see what to expect, what to go through. And I think that's sort of how it went through.
And Cheryl, if you if you didn't address your question, feel free to add in and elaborate a little bit the question. But I want to move to a couple more questions, and then I want to pick your brains a little bit on the technology scene in Malaysia and Southeast Asia in general, Chen Chow. But before that, Dato Munira Lui asked this question. Congratulations on your success in FAVE. What were the main challenges when you wanted to grow and scale, and what did you do? Because I know last year you did a couple of great. I mean, you brought in people like Jake, Abdullah, and a couple of others. You brought in some big folks, and you were pushing really hard, to scale. I mean, what were some of the other things that you did, to drive your scaling?
Yeah, thanks a lot. Yeah, thanks a lot, Dr. Munira, for the wishes and the questions. Yeah, so I think as we go through this, right, I think the challenge will always be there. And I think that as we go through, it's just different challenge. And there are many challenges that we face, right? So I think one of it is that limited resources. I think pre-COVID or even during COVID is even more. So I think a lot of time is not about what we want to do, right? Adding more things to what we want to do. I think a lot of it is actually asking ourselves what we shouldn't do, right? I think a lot of time is put a barrier bar internally to say, okay, because every little extra thing that we are working on or choosing to work on is also taking away some resources. And I think being a small, mid-sized company, we don't have unlimited resources. So I think the technology resources is limited. So if we work on one partnership, likelihood it means that we cannot work on another partnership. If we work on launching a feature, likelihood we cannot do another feature. So I think a lot of that is that I think and zooming out and looking at it, and I think a lot of asking the tough question internally. I think having the team to be able to openly challenge. I think a lot of times very normal for the team to tell myself, Joel, and say, okay, that is not realistic. This thing doesn't work. And then with each other, I think being very able to be frank, open, to discuss about it and say this can be done, this can't be done, this should be done differently, this how it should be working on. So I think that will be key as we're building through.
Okay. And Chen Chow, just hopefully, Dato Munira, if you want to expand on that question, let us know. But I think Jaden was somewhat satisfied with your answer, so well done, Chen Chow. But I want to go deeper into what do you think? I mean, I know you're not you're not a predictor of the future, but if you look at the tech scene, and a lot of different things are happening, and the permutations of the lockdown and COVID, and so many different aspects. I mean, if you look at in the IR4 piece, you have the physical piece with digital, with printing, and a whole bunch of things with robotics and so on, and then you got biological changes and digital changes, right, with a lot of blockchain and a whole bunch of other technology. But if you look at all these, intermesh together with the lockdown and the economic situations in countries like the US and so on, what's in store for the tech space, especially here in Southeast Asia, and what what sort of advice would you impart to technopreneurs and entrepreneurs or SMEs, in this environment that we have, Chin Chow, just to pick your brain a little bit.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Richard. Yeah. So I think like during this kind of period, right, where a lot of changes, a lot of things, I think what it also means is challenging the status quo. The incumbent is no longer the strongest, right? So I think in at many sectors, let's say whether even from travel sector to even local commerce to event space, entertainment, many aspects, businesses that were significantly large today may not be as large. Of course, they could be still quite large. Let's say, like example, bookings .com just announced their quarterly results, right? They were close to 90% decline, right? So I think that actually shift the playing field across. So I think to all the potential entrepreneurs, or even those entrepreneurs that are just starting, I think it's opportunities, right? I think a lot of it is how do you see the things differences, because in a larger company to change is not as easy as a smaller outfit, right? Because a lot of times you have more consideration, more peoples to take care of, more resources, more things that already stuck with, right? The incumbent, more shifting. So I think a lot of things being the newer one that you come in, I think it's a lot of time it's easier to drive through. So I think a lot of it is don't think of where the puck is at. Think of where the puck is going to go to. So in the sector that are in the problems in a target audience that you're looking at, where would it be? What a problem they're going to face in 2 months' time, right? And I think, let's say take an example, Custom. I think what they did was during lockdown, they decided to ask themselves, when the market reopen, what should they do? So they are not trying to say, let's try to sell car during lockdown. But on the day one, when lockdown reopen, how can they be way ahead of everyone else in selling the cars, right? So I think a lot of that is those kind of questions where we zoom out and ask ourselves, how do we be able to step ahead? And I think that the fundamentals became much more important now. I think with COVID, with the economic situation, everything, I think investors was go deeper, asking the question of unit economics, sustainability, right? So I think maybe in the few years ago, you talk about fast growth. Investors say, great job, let's invest. Today, a lot more is asking, what's the unit economics? Is it sustainable? And how is the lifetime value of customers? What's the acquisition cost? And how do you get the whole thing connect the dots, right? Is this a business that will sustain? And then what is the risk in your business in this new normal? Would your business be stronger, weaker? And I think especially your existing company, investors are also looking at how do you react and respond during this period. Are you react positively, or you can't handle this period of COVID, right? So I think a lot of those aspects are all being tested and seen.
Okay, and some of you may be wondering, where is Karamjit Singh? And Karam was scheduled to be here. Unfortunately, just buzzing him, and apparently there's no electricity in his house. So he's in total darkness, and he's trying to figure out a way without the Wi-Fi and everyone to get on board. So Chen Chow, in spite of all the technology, right, not having electricity just dampens pretty much everything, right? So that's another. So we have TechTalk Friday, but Karamjit Singh has no electricity in his house. So I'm wondering whether he paid his electricity bill now. But anyway, we'll deal on that. So Chen Chow, just if you kind of entrepreneur, and I know there's been a lot of talk in our previous show with Aaron Sama and also with the KPI soft guys and a few others. Everyone's saying that the new exciting opportunities are in the B2B space. And the B2C is very crowded, and lots of things are happening there. But the B2B is an opportunity. What's your thought on opportunities that should be leveraged in this new era or this new times? Or it's the same, it's just a lot more intensity and a lot more competition? I mean, what are your thoughts around this space?
Yeah. So I think, like, let's say, I would say that the space, I think, are shifting definitely. So I think in terms of B2B space, I think there are more players going into it as well. I think this period, I think people are looking into it and optimizing. I think the each space, I think a lot of time, I think as an entrepreneur, maybe to ask yourself is what is for your startup, is what is your unfair advantage within your team, within your understanding of the market, experience, knowledge, passion, which aspects will be which industry, which segment, which business model that you are most aligned to. Because a lot of time is that who can execute better. All right. So because in the end is that there opportunity in almost everything. Because whenever there's a consumer, there's a merchants, there's a needs, there's a vendors, whatever, there will always be a needs. Then the question is who can fulfill that needs? Who can solve that problems? Right. So I think if you zoom out on it, I think in the end is, let's say for example, I don't play computer games. I'm not passionate in computer games. If I were to go in and do computer gaming, even though computer gaming is going fast booming, fast growing, I may not be the right person, right? So I think a lot of it is zooming out, ask yourself, and I think in this startup journey, a lot of it is about like your mental strength, right? There will be a lot of down moments, a lot of rejections. Let's say talking about investors, people talk about successful investments. But I think behind each successful investment, there are many, many rejections. And I think we go through so many of that. And I think a lot of it is as we got through those rejections, is how do you taking it? And because it will affect our personal self-esteem, you affect the team morale, looking into it. So I think a lot of it is how do you handle that? And also a lot of time is how do you be able to evolve from that? Because every investor is going to give you different feedback. Some of it is relevant to you, some of it may not be, because everyone from a different vantage point. So I think it's how do you take feedback, take the right feedback and going on it and mapping it. Because the last thing and I think of, let's say fundraising, going on the fundraising aspects, right, is think of fundraising just like dating. I like to connect it just like that, right? Because let's say think of every guy, every girl is different. Every guy, every girl at a different stage of journey of their dating life is different as well. At that point, maybe they were like exciting people. At the point, maybe they are more stable people, right? And everyone is very different. There's no perfect answer to say that is the perfect person, right? And the same thing with investor and startup as well. There's no perfect. In the end, if there's a chemistry, there's a mesh, it works. The only difference between dating is likelihood. That one is 1-to-1. This one likelihood is many to many.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, to follow through on your dating analogy, Dato' Munirab follows through. It's like, thanks, Chen Chow, but, how do you influence investors to invest in you? I mean, is there some storytelling, or is there, I mean, I know a lot of guys say you need this deck and you need this, and, there seem to be like a formula, but what are your thoughts? I mean, is it formulaic, that we follow, or, what tips would you give to the folks like us? I mean, Leronomics, we are about to embark on our Series A also. So it'd be useful to hear what your take is on this question.
Yeah. Good luck on your Series A, Roshan. Yeah, I'm sure you can ace it. Yeah. And that's Munira, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, to Munira's question, yeah.
Yeah, that's Munira, yeah. I think good question. I think in terms of influencing investors to invest, I think a lot of it is understanding the investor. And I think a lot of time when we go to institutional investors, whether it's a VC or whether it's strategic corporates and everything, there are multiple stakeholders there. I think a lot of time is knowing what they're looking at, who in there going to be decision maker, who in there are looking for what kind of investments. Right. So some of them, they are very clear. They knew what they're looking for. Some of them, they may not be that clear. They are more like exploring. Right. And I think a lot of it is taking a lot of both sides to understand each other, to date, to basically going through. And I think at the same time, when investors looking for you, you're also looking for investors. Because in the end, is a mesh, right? And is a support going to take this journey go through many years. And a lot of time, the right investors are the one that going to be there with you during great times, and more importantly, during very tough times.
Yep.
Think
Yep.
of it in 5 years' time. If you go through very tough time, how will your investor behave, react at that time? And I think during this COVID, I think a lot of startup founders, when we talk about, I think people talk about like, yeah, now we see the true colors of the investors, right? Those that when they invested in us 2 years, 5 years ago, we may not know, right? Things are fine. But I think during this COVID, you will see that some investors will be very supportive, helpful. Some of them may not be. And I think each of them may have different reason for that. So I think a lot of it is understanding it. And I think is showing the big picture. So I think most of them want to see a great vision, and they want to see the execution, and proven the track record as you're building on it, right? The results, the data, the people,
Yep.
so I think a lot of that, and I think in the end is need to align that across, right? And a lot of time they will do due diligence as well. I think a lot of investors will go out there, talk to merchants, consumers, like even your team, the staff, to understand, right? So I think in the end is, let's say example, an investor typical simple question to due diligence is that they find 5 people in the company. They say, what's the vision of the company? What's the goal of the company? If five key people in the company tell 5 different answers, that means I think something is wrong, right? With here,
Yep.
right? And
Yep.
of course, you never be able to fully frame exact, but I think in the end is, do the team align and seeing how do you make the decisions? And I think during this COVID as well, I think how we take actions to optimize the cost, how they take actions to rebound planning. I think that factors in quite a bit as well. I think as
So,
investors
so
evaluate.
I think Dr. Maria adds like, she agrees with you. And I think while we are tempted to, get investors on board, we probably need to be mindful of the synergy. And I think Cheryl follows up with interesting. I mean, she found your dating analogy very interesting and ha ha ha. But I think it's, you were saying this like it's about that fit, right? Ultimately, different parts of the journey requires different things. But she wants to follow up with another question. Say, would it be different for a new brand just coming up? Would similar things apply? What's your take on that?
Yeah, so I think it's so think of it, let's say a new brand, right? So let's say you just newly start up. So I think there are a set of investors that specialize in investing in the very early stage, right? And then we talk about, let's say, very early stage, there are also few aspects, right? So I think maybe I'll group it into 3 groups, right? So one is family and friends. The second
Okay.
is angel investors, the individual that investing. And I think the
Yep.
third one is VCs, right? Venture capitals, right? So I think a lot of it also as a new brand, I think of it is, I think ask yourself, I think a lot of it before you even go to investors, ask yourself, why do you do this journey, startup, right? This venture. How long do you want to do this? What does success means to you in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, right? Do you plan to build this journey and eventually hand over to your family, your children? Do you plan to build it and eventually want to sell it off? You want to build it, eventually go IPO, merge it, or you want to build it in a small ways just so that you can sustain? Like I met one startup founder before, right? The two startup mother founders, they were young mothers, and they were like, okay, they just uh, left left their job because they wanted to spend more time with their kids. So they went on this new journey because they want to have more time to spend with their family. That was very different. So their yardstick of success is that more balance, work-life balance, and
Yep.
able to going on this, right? So that was what they're looking for.
Yep. So I guess yeah, different stocks for different people lah. She adds my experience is that partnership is beyond just funding, but the synergy, alignment, and decision making plus culture lah. I assume you would agree with that, right, Chen Chow?
Yes, yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
definitely.
we've got a couple more minutes. We can take a couple more questions. I mean, thanks for all the comments. I can't highlight all the hello comments, but if you do have a question for Chen Chow, and for those of you who are again wondering, join our show. Where's Karamjit Singh? He is in a house where there's no electricity and there's no Wi-Fi, and essentially he can't get access to be on the show. So apologies for not having Karam here with us. But we as soon as things work out for him, he will be back. right? So let's not. If you want, where Karam lives, go to his house and help him out with a hotspot or something. Okay, so Chen Chow, as a closing, as we close out this session, as I see one or two more questions pop up, right? Is Again, I think let me just see. Matthew Barr saying agrees 100% with Dato Munira, and Cheryl says it's a very relevant insight. Thank you, good advice for those of us who are new to this. I mean, so as a closing piece, right? Chen Chow, what sort of advice, sort of final advice, your one nugget or two nuggets of wisdom that you would like to impart on, on folks who are watching the show? I mean, primarily these are SMEs and business owners and, technopreneurs, essentially. What sort of advice would you impart to them, as your own personal advice to these guys as they go on this journey, not just in terms of funding, but overall, And the good news is, guess who do we have here? Karamjit Singh, just in time, for the
Okay.
news segment. I will be getting, Karam will get you, to tell us a bit about today's story. But as we close out, I've got one final question for Chen Chow. One or two nuggets of wisdom that you want to impart, and then we will go over to Karam. So Chen Chow, your piece of advice.
Yeah, I think my advice would be think big, start small, fail fast, scale faster, right? So you want to think very big, but you want to start very small. Start from the first step, right? Don't, because when you try to start the whole thing, you will not be able to handle. And if you try something doesn't work, fail fast. And whatever that you, and more importantly, a lot of time whatever doesn't work, we know how to stop it and then change, right? But more importantly, if you find whatever that you work, whether it's a campaign working, whether it's a feature working, product working, or whatnot, whatever work, how do you scale faster? So think big, start small, fail fast, scale faster. Yeah, all the best.
All right, Chen Chow, thank you. We're gonna move you back to the studio for a little while, and if Karam has some questions, we will probably bring you back if that's okay with you, Chen Chow. So I'm going to just
Okay.
move you out for a second, and we'll just get Karam to tell us the latest, greatest tech news. So, Chen Chow, thank you so much for your invaluable time. Looks like Karam has found some electricity in his house, or I don't know whether he's using candle. Let's find out. Are you using candles, Karam, to light up your house?
I mean, in 8 years, 8 years of working from home, because once I left my print publication, you start working from home most of the time. Today was the worst. The power has been out like almost 7 hours.
Wow. Okay.
So terrible. So
and now you have power back, or this is a generator?
It just came on about like 5 minutes ago, and then my wife is screaming, "We need to get genset." I say, okay, hold on. So I gotta run to some hardware shop tomorrow.
The world of technology is still dictated by electricity.
Yeah, man.
Still have some constraints.
Thank you, Nikolai Tesla, not Thomas Edison. Nikolai Tesla, because my kids are big fans of Nikolai Tesla.
Yeah, I know, man. So and you can watch the Edison versus Tesla movie. I mean, there's actually a pretty good movie. Yeah. So Karam, tell us latest. We have Chen Chow on standby. We'll bring him back in if there's a need to in a second. But tell us today's story. I didn't get I didn't hear from you because of your lack of electricity. So tell us, what is today's big DNA story or big scoop, or are you gonna tell us something interesting that we need to look at? Go ahead, Karam.
No, so first of all, I mean, I could have hooked up the tablet to my data on my phone, but it's not good enough for video. And coincidentally, 2 days ago, I was at an appointment, and at the table next door, somebody was watching last week's 51-minute marathon show, and he gave some fantastic comment, but he also said that my audio was not very clear. I was choppy.
Yeah, the audio.
So I was worried and you got video on, and I spoke to your guy. Sashi said I have to be on video. I cannot just use audio. So I didn't want to get on and make it a horrible experience for everyone. It's quite frustrating. But that aside, the reason why I jumped in late,
let's go to the topic now.
There's no electricity. No, I couldn't get on the show. I was sweating. I got to go and take a nice cold shower after this. But anyway, talk about the news of the day. I mean, I think for me, the news of the week is the fact that somebody that Chen Chow also knows, Ching from iMoney, is having the fight of his life now. Yep. his back is to the wall because he was invested in by an Australian company called iSelect. And then it just came out this week. iSelect announced, iSelect is listed in the ASX, Australian Stock Exchange. They announced that they had a buyer on hand to put in more money into iMoney. But because of the COVID situation, that deal got screwed. And so iSelect says we are not going to keep putting in more money into, iSelect said we're not going to put in more money into Ching. And so they have sold the company back to Ching for a nominal sum. You know,
Wow.
so when you hear nominal sum, it's like, you know,
$1.
1 Aussie dollar or 10 Aussie dollars or
Yeah,
1,000
yeah.
Aussie dollars. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
now Ching is really scrambling to try to bring in an investor, and because it's a part of a listed company, the numbers you can see some data points there for iSelect, and they actually increased their revenue by 52% in the first half of 2020, which is actually the last 6 months of 2019 lah. Their year end overlaps into 6 months into this year, so they increased revenue. But iSelect said that the business still needed substantial injection of capital. And, you know, Chen Chow mentioned something interesting. Among his key highlights was he said, fail fast and scale fast also, right?
Yep. In fact,
iMoney has been there since 2012. So Munira, I get my spidey sense or my Bangara sense goes off when I hear cliche words like, you know, think big, start small, fail fast.
But that's what Chen Chow said. She's repeating what Chen Chow said.
Yeah,
she's repeating what Chen Chow said.
But she says she loves it. But I feel in the Malaysian context, you're building a business from Malaysia, from Southeast Asia. You have to be very careful about running, you know, jumping whole in with those kind of, you know, sexy catchphrases. And, you know, we have a recent example of iFlix, right? Patrick Grove goes all in, right? He says his email tagline used to be go big or go home. And, you know, they raised a lot of money and then look where they are now, right? They also couldn't bring investor. Now Tencent is getting the company on the cheap. And the company has about, what I've told recently, has about 20 million subscribers. You know, there are 20 million people watching iFlix. And even that wasn't enough to bring another investor. So this thing about think big, fail fast, scale fast, or scale big, or whatever, the combination, be cautious. Be skeptical. You can approach it, but I think you have to be cautious and say, what can we do? What can I? Because now Ching couldn't scale fast. That's the thing. He started in 2000.
But the Ching, no, so the question, I guess, I mean, to me, I look at it, if Ching really believes in this business, to be able to get it back at the cheap, I mean, you got that, you managed to sell it and then you get it on the cheap, whereas, you know, that it's not a negative, right? I mean, it's kind of positive. Now, how do you
can get somebody? So the reason is because the Australian company iSelect, even in January, Roshan, they pumped in, they extended a $500,000 loan to iMoney. So this is just in January, and imagine your cash flow in the middle of March onwards until end of May, right? So if you needed that infusion of cash flow and you've got now hardly any revenue coming in, so it's a super tough. So that's why I think the point is that they needed cash infusion still, and it's very hard for certain businesses to scale. You can grow, but then is revenue coming at that point? This is an 8-year-old business now. I hope Ching succeeds and pulls a rabbit out of the hat and he gets an investor to come in who sees long term, because the business, for him to be successful, he needs to scale. And by the way, his is a business in 4 countries already, and yet the unit economics don't yet work, I think. So it's an incredible challenge, and I just wanted to spotlight that Ching is, you know, fighting tooth and nail to keep iMoney going. So any of you listening and you're interested, ask him to show you the numbers and talk to him.
Sure. So but I suspect a lot of our businesses are going to be in similar predicament. Right? I mean, I was sitting with a group of tech entrepreneurs, all of them in the HR space, you know, Pulsify and a few others, you know, but none of them are HR people somehow, including myself. You know, we sort of all had a talk, and you know, at some point in time, I mean, there is going to be a bit of a struggle, right? And I mean, this is where you know, like-minded businesses where there's some synergy, you know, we should be talking a little bit about not just collaboration really, but really in terms of integration and potentially looking at some sort of consolidation, you know,
merger,
Yeah, I mean, it's something that worked in the 80s, where you started to say, let's look at our supply chain, or let's look at our value chain, and start saying, does it make sense for, the top 15, tech, HR tech, or fintech, or this, to start looking and saying which sort of play through the different parts of the ecosystem, come together as a bigger player, to be able to then fill a market need in an aggregated manner, right? Versus one, little side. Because I mean, as an investor, also, it's like I can make one investment, but I can kind of and each of them keep their products. I mean, you keep the products niche in the specific zones and areas, but you talk a little bit about that consolidation. I'm gonna bring Chen Chow back into the dialogue, since we mentioned it like 10 times. Since
Don't
everyone
put him on the spot. I challenge him. Scale fast.
Just to let Munira makes a comment, and then Karam comments and scolds her for it. So this is the only show where if you comment, you get scolded for making a comment. No other show.
I say be cautious.
Give more comment. Please comment. Here you make comment, get scolded. But it's okay. She's still making comments.
I want Chen Chow to sweat as much as I was sweating.
So Munira says, "Oh yeah, cool. It's in the mindset." So I'm gonna bring. So watch out. I mean, when you make a comment, Karam may scold you, but it's okay. We do it in love and in a constructive
with
way.
love. We scold, we admonish. We don't scold, we admonish.
Yeah, absolutely.
With love.
So there you go. TechTalk. Beware of your comments. I see Matthew Barsing, says we see a lot of VCs are looking at AI tech and disruption when exploring investments. I'm not sure what he means by VC. I don't know whether he wants us to comment.
Yeah, he's right.
Okay, so Chen Chow, you heard what Karam said, and you heard the predicament that Ching is in. And I think a lot of other, not just Ching, I think there are a lot of other companies in similar predicaments. I think FAVE at one point, I remember we had this conversation, you two were a bit of a tight spot, cash flow and so on and so forth. I'm not sure, maybe I heard you wrong, but I mean, what do you do in a situation like this? I mean, would you have any input, or if you have anything to add? If not, you can scold Karam, they will add to the
Yes,
banter. He scolds him except me, and then he scolds me back. But feel free to comment, Chen Chow.
Yeah, so I think what Karam mentioned, I think the cautiousness is key as well, right? I think that's why I think just now maybe the context when I brought that point up was, I think think big, start small. I think that part should be less contention, fail fast. Yes. So I think when it doesn't work, and then I think the word scale faster, right? So I think
Karam,
and the word is
okay. Go ahead. Sorry.
So just now when I say the scale faster, what I mean was if things work, right? And I think I brought up the point of unit economics and everything, right? So I think if you know it right, if things work well, you scale faster, right? So I think one of the things also is a lot of time is if you find the right thing that works, how do you bring it across, right? So I think that's one aspect, right? Because I think a lot of startup, one of the things is they do a lot of experiment trial, and then finish, next one, right? Whatever it does well or doesn't do well, you don't continue doing it, right? So I think that's maybe the context on that. But I think on the point on Ching one, I think that knowing Ching, I think he is a very hardworking person, very detailed,
incredible,
and very kind-hearted. I think it's going to be, of course, the challenge is big, but I think that he will definitely have the right heart, and I think that he is very humble willing to learn and connect to go across. So I think definitely think there's chance. Of course, I think it's not going to be walk in the park, but I think that the situations, I think you will need to find who the right people to cross.
I mean, one of the things I said is that, maybe there is a need for some consolidation in some of these spaces. I mean, there's a lot of, what are your thoughts? I mean, if we were to, we're talking a lot about it, but somebody needs to take the first step and say, let's talk about consolidation. Let's talk about mergers, and in a similar ecosystem now, right? Is that something you guys are thinking about? I assume that's part of what Pi is looking at, right? To some extent, the terminal, and you guys have a app. It's a nice tie-in in an ecosystem. But should more businesses be looking at that as a way out?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is, I wouldn't say as a way out immediately. I think a lot of it is, building synergy, right? So I think in the end, the question that go in whether merger, acquisition, everything is 1 + 1 equal a lot more than 2, right? And a lot of merger acquisition is not value creation, but value depreciated. right?
Yep.
So I think because there's culture, there's a change management, there's many edit aspects, trust and everything. So I think a lot of it is how to build that, right? I think is there a clear synergy? Is
Yep.
that much more plus point than negative point? Because a lot of time is while people are moving forward, looking at it, excited about it, a lot of time is looking at the plus point only, but miss out all the risk and negative point, everything, right? So I think a lot of it is into looking into it and seeing it. I think for us, I think back then when we acquired the group of subsidiaries, I think we went through those kind of process, looking at it as well. So I think in the end is how do you tie across, right? There's the two parties knowing which are the strength each party going to bring across, right? And how do you going to work together? It's like a lot of like a dating as an example that I had much earlier before Karam came, right? So
Karam, we
so
talked about dating
Okay.
on the next show, but it's okay. Okay.
Okay,
So,
here, Roshan.
yeah.
So the interesting thing for everyone also about the iChing, so you know, iPrice is a comparison site, right? But iPrice has scale, and it's scale in the terms of it's got breadth, you know. Okay, whereas iChing is a comparison site, financial comparison, but it goes deep in only the financial, you know, part, right? Anything through insurance policies, you know, your credit card and you know, bank mortgages and all that. So it's so because he's specializing in one area, it seems to be very tough. And I had somebody yesterday, Chen Chow, maybe you can comment. He felt that the iMoney model does not work already. Investors are not interested in that particular model anymore, vertical. So I mean, it's, you know, we are on a live show, and you may be reluctant to say that, you know, Ching's trying his best, but somebody said that model doesn't work anymore. So, and I had somebody else tell me, give me that also. So do you think that could be the case? You try your best. The entrepreneur is incredible. Somebody is hardworking, right? And Ching is crazy focused, I know. But at some point then, the circumstances in the market have changed and shifted, and you're left out in the cold. Hey, guys, you know, you either try to pivot dramatically, like what Patrick Grove sometimes says you got to do, or then you got to face reality. So what do you think of that, though? Or of the fact that iChing's model now is too niche and too narrow, and it's hard to monetize?
Yeah. So yeah, I don't have the full there a lot of visibility of their numbers, everything like, right? Yeah, but I think that think of it, right? Financial sector is actually huge, right? If you think of how many banks out there that make billions across, right? So I think the key will be that how do you create the synergy across, right? So and I think that what iMoney does and what iPrice does slightly different is that I think iPrice, the whole process were all digital. That means they connect and drive the transactions through.
And it's
Whereas
automated.
iMoney, I think
they've got algorithms in the background. Yeah. Whereas iMoney, you know, they have people actually writing articles, creating content, right, to get people to keep coming to their site and looking at some of the sponsor articles and ads there actually. And it's very much driven by conversion also. So that's super tough.
So I think Chen Chow, the better question is, if you were Cheng, what would you do?
Yeah, so I think that maybe it's looking into which part of the business that really have done well and which part have not, right? I think there's a book, Island of Sea in the something in the Red. I can't remember exactly the title. It's one of the MIT professor or alumni that wrote it. I think a lot of it in any business, there'll be parts that is valuable, they're doing very well, but there's a lot of time there's also parts that's not doing. I think in all business, including FAVE, I think we all have that. I think a lot of time is how, and those that are not doing well, unless there's a very key strategic reason, right? This is a lost leader to bring in customer traffic. What are the things? Unless if there's not, then it's how do you pick the battle to knock it off, those or change those, and then how do you, for those part of your business that work well, then how do you take it and scale it, right? So because a lot of it is that, because or else the part that doing well and the part that not doing well cancel each other, so they became mediocre on average, right? So I think it's a lot of that aspects. I think going through it and see it.
Okay.
It's very good. And I think basically Ching has got very hard decisions to make now, right? Because you're also in 4 countries, although predominantly it's Malaysian based. Yeah, what do you do with the Philippines? What do you do with Singapore, right?
Yeah. So, it's a 54, going to be 54 minutes, Karam. So it's another long,
my
ridiculous.
fault. Totally my fault.
But never mind.
Y'all
I want to wrap this up. I mean, Karam, Karam, any other comments, any other things that we need to know about?
No,
That
I think
in
I
tech
want to
space?
give a shout out also to Joachim Sebastian from Everpeaks Consulting,
Everpeaks,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Because
He got an
Everpeaks is an
investment, right?
omni-channel e-commerce player,
Right. He
and
managed to get ETF, right?
their ECF platform, their ECF campaign on pitching
I saw that.
ended recently, and they raised 1.4 million ringgit, and
Yeah,
he
but
gave up 25% of the company. And
okay.
Joachim is committed to doing this something Chen Chow he calls M2C. M2C is manufacture to consumer. So he's even trying to disrupt the e-commerce space, where he's telling manufacturers, why don't you sell direct to consumers also, besides selling in bulk to your big customers. So interesting disruption going on all over the place, still at this moment. So a shout out to Everpeaks. All the best to you, Joachim, right? Keep charging ahead and being a disruptor.
Great. And just to add to that, I think started with a farm to table, and the similar sort of disruptions in different ecosystems, or where trying to cut off all the middle layers and all the fat in cream in between. So interesting. And I think it'll continue to evolve as time goes on. Chen Zhao, appreciate your time to be on the show. Thank you again, and we look forward to getting you. Maybe in a year's time, we'll update us on what's happening in FAVE, and start to pick your brain. And
hey, Roshan, you cannot. A year is too long, especially now. We do in 4 months' time, every 4 months, because time is
we got a waiting list
now.
of people who want to
Thanks
be on the
the
show.
Pandemic, time is condensed. Don't talk old school. 1 year. 1 year is actually
All
like
right,
7
man.
years.
All right, Chen Zhao, you'll be back next week.
Adopt dog years now. Adopt dog years.
All right, everyone. This is going to be a wrap for us. Thank
Yep.
you, everyone. It's been fantastic. Thanks for sticking around on TechTalk Friday. And next Friday, 7 p.m., same thing. We hopefully will have more guests, and I'm sure
Much
we do.
shorter show, and I'll be there before that. And then everyone go to TNB's website and give them a thumb down. TNB.
I don't know, like you're gonna. I probably you're the only house that got affected, lah. So never mind.
Oh man,
We'll leave it at that. So with that, have a fabulous weekend, everyone. Have a great weekend. Enjoy yourselves. Refresh, re-energize, and we'll see you next Friday, 7 p.m. here on TechTalk Friday. Take care. Bye bye.
My deepest apologies.
It's a wrap. TechTalk Friday. See you next Friday at 7 p.m. Thank you, guys. Wonderful.